there was not a person on this planet who could raise me from the spiritual grave I was in. I was living in hell. You know, people like to think you have to die to go to hell. Well, I got news for you. The devil is not merciful enough to wait. He will take what he can from you and he will drag you there and keep you there until you reach up. And on that day, I reached up. And I know that like miracles are among us every day, you know, and running this account, it's just been astonishing. I mean, how many women write to me that they were diagnosed infertile, impossible to have kids. They've got multiple kids. How many people in recovery, you know, thought it was impossible and they're, you know, sober and clean. How many people thought that their marriages were too far gone and yet God restored it.
Hello and welcome to the Encourager Podcast, where we have encouraging conversations to help you joyfully harmonize your home and work life. I'm your host, Rebecca Scott. I'm a wife, mother, designer, coach, and author. I'm here to help encourage and empower you to confidently make decisions that work for you and your stage of life, whatever that might be. Are you ready to take your life to the next, more organized level? Are you tired of feeling overwhelmed and overstressed over all the roles you have? The Encourager Academy can help you take back the joy in these roles and help you harmonize both home and work life. The Encourager Academy online courses and coaching programs are designed to help you overcome your biggest obstacles in getting it all done by helping you navigate 5 systems: me, food, family, work, and home. Whether you're looking to improve your food system, grow your career, or strengthen your relationships with your family, we have the tools and resources you need to succeed within our academy. I will guide you through each system with guided worksheets, lifetime access to rewatch the videos, and the encouragement you need to fulfill your roles. And with our flexible online platform, you can learn at your own pace on your own schedule. Here are just a few of the benefits of joining the Encourager Academy: lifetime access to rewatch the videos and the guided worksheets, proven strategies and techniques for overcoming overwhelm and general fatigue with all your roles, practical tools and resources for improving all your systems no matter how much or how complicated, and flexibility to learn and grow on your own schedule from anywhere. So why wait? Join the Encourager Academy today and start harmonizing both work and home life. Use the code WeGotThis to get $50 off. Visit our website at theencourageracademy.com to learn more and enroll. Hello, Encouragers. On this week's podcast, I've got a special guest that I actually found through Instagram, and I'm going to give you a little bit of background before I go ahead and introduce her. Instagram has now figured out that I do love Christian reels, and I love to hear short messages and short sermons, and I think it's so good. I mean, I know there's a lot of arguing about that, you know, they figure out who you are. I'm like, but in this case, I really like who they're figuring out, that I do like to see this Christian words. And so our guest today came across my feed, and I was like, gosh, that made me think about her phrase all day. So it was profound would be the word that I use. And I thought, gosh, and she's adorable, and look at her background, her sweet family. And I was like, oh, maybe she would be an influencer for Rebecca Scott Designs, my purse company, or 1948 Leather for that matter. So I sent the infamous message through Instagram where you're like, cross your fingers, please, please, please tell me her team will let her see this, right? And she writes back and she says, I'd be happy to. And I'm like, sweet. So our guest also has been an quote influencer for us as well, and genuinely likes them and uses them, which is also a whole nother story when you dip into the influencer world. But I like doing that influencer world in terms of who I can relate to, and not just any random person that wants to shoot it, because it's a whole nother podcast. If you're ever interested in learning a little bit, I've definitely learned how not to do it. And this was just one of those connections that was very genuine and worked out. And then after, I think it was actually during working through what products she would love to carry, found out about her book. And so today we're going to talk about her book. Without further ado, I'm introducing our guest, Trisha Fenimore. Thank you for coming.
Hey, Rebecca. Oh my gosh. It's such a privilege. Your backpack is at my feet as we speak. I use it religiously, no pun intended, along with the other products. I'm a huge fan of your products and your design. And I just think you're doing amazing things. So thank you for inviting me on.
Yes, thank you. Trisha is a wife. She is a mother. She's an author, and she's also a Christian. And we're just going to talk about this journey. So I got the book, and I think it only took me like 4 days. And I know you know this because you're an author, but you find people saying, like, they say, I feel like I know you after they read their book. And I want you to tell us what the title of your book is, because that is a mic drop right there. Just the title alone, you guys, is pretty provocative. And then the content of the book. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So it's a memoir, which means it's my personal story. It's called Pray for Them, the True Story of a Racist White Christian Called to Black Seminary. What it's about is exactly what the subtitle says. It's really my journey and my testimony through atheism, addiction, hate, specifically racism. And in my 20s, in a, I mean, there's no other word other than insane. It felt like an insane call that I felt God to call me, of all people, a recovering alcoholic and addict and a recovering atheist, to seminary school, least of all a predominantly Black seminary school in Harlem, New York. But that is exactly where he called me to be. And I went. If you follow me on social media, you know I'm a big fan of Jonah, because I relate so much to him. And over the years, I've learned that when God calls you to Nineveh, you better just go. So he called me to this school, and I just went. And it wasn't until many years later that he asked me, that I felt God call me to write a book about my experience. I just thought he was calling me to go. I wasn't trying to I thought it was to become a pastor or to follow some traditional course. And things, as they often do in life, took some very unexpected turns. And here we find ourselves, where I'm on Instagram and I'm an author, and I wrote the book. And thank you for saying how quickly you finished it. That's always my biggest compliment as an author, is hearing people say that they finished it quickly. That I know what it means when I finish a book quickly, and to know that somebody has had that experience with my book is just very humbling.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about, you mentioned you got called to seminary. What does that look like to be called? Because tell us the background of the journey, because we do want you to go out and get the book, and we'll provide that in the show notes here. But the journey kind of started with addiction first and atheism paired together, correct?
So yeah, I would say I fell into atheism in elementary school. I had grown up going to church, but there was never much of a living faith there. Like we would kind of say the scripted prayers at home. God is great. God is good. Let us thank him for our food. Amen. Like that's the dinner time prayer. That was really the prayer life in our home, was the nightly dinner time prayer that ironically I was the one tasked to say each night. So here we find ourselves. But then I would go to, Sunday school and church, and I would just never really feel that much of a connection. I was always asking pesky questions like why. I would get super bored in the wooden pews, and I would pick at my fingers and look around and daydream. And it was a little bit frowned upon, and so I never had there wasn't much for me to feel like I was walking away from as a kid, if that makes sense. Because I had never really benefited from a faith and never really experienced a relational faith, meaning you have a relationship with God, that was not something that I was introduced to until much later into adulthood, when I found Christianity, or rather when Christianity found me. But I would say addiction came early after I found atheism. So I found atheism, I think, in the 5th grade, around the age of 11. And then, the world had its way with me fast. And I tried a lot of different things. I tried to be popular. I tried getting accomplishments. When that didn't, give me that sense of peace and fulfillment, it's almost like I believe the relationship with God is necessary for humans. Like as much as food, water, oxygen, a relationship with God is as vital. Probably more so, because if you're not eating, if you don't have any food, you're probably going to be praying. But so, like, and with water, if you don't have clean water available, you'll just kind of drink a puddle on the ground. You'll drink out of a stream that might not be clean. You'll drink dirty water. And so for me, not having that need satisfied through a living faith with God, I drank dirty water. I looked to guys for approval. I looked to alcohol for, a sense of peace and ease. I looked to all these things in the world. I struggled with body image, as so many women do, and like dysfunctional stuff there. And it's like, I joke with people on my Instagram. I'm like, if you've had a problem in your life, there's probably like a 50% chance that I've also had that same problem. And what it wound up being was I just kind of bottomed out at the age of 23. I had been a daily drinker for years. It had grown to such a degree that it was the first thing I did in the morning was I would go to my fridge and crack open a beer. And if you see me on Instagram, I don't look like that would be my story. I look like a typical car line soccer mom. But like there I was, chugging beer before I would head to my job. And it's like, the world's going to be the world, man. And it was only when I had so failed to conquer the world, like it was when I had so failed and was so like demoralized through every failed attempt to stop drinking. I tried to stop drinking every day for over a year, and almost every day I could barely make it to noon. Just to put it into perspective at my experience with failure and what that looked like. And on the final day in the fall of 2011, my drinking the night before had been so bad that it resulted in rock bottom. So like that, that kind of just puts into perspective, like what my night was like before that. But it's like, I woke up, it was rock bottom. And I just realized, man, I can't do this. Like I feel like as a human being, I do not have the capability to do this. And it was then that I said my first true prayer, I believe, in my entire life. And that prayer was, God, I don't know what you are, and I don't know if you are, but if you are, please help me, because I am willing to have been wrong about you for my entire life. If you just please help me, and I think that oftentimes God meets us at the level of our desperation. And, while it's been really painful at the time, over the years, I've had a lot of desperation for God, and it has forged this relationship that is the most paramount thing in my life. On Instagram, people ask me all the time, they're like, how do you derive these lessons out of like loading the groceries into your car? How do you, picking your kid up and putting him in the car seat? Like, how is that a sermon? But I think like from what I've seen with God, I'm living on his time. It's bonus time for me, because I know when I said that first prayer, that was the end of my life. Like I was going to die. Anything after that was life given to me by him through grace. And now I owe it all back to him. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Thank you for the background in that. So many thoughts come to mind. I think it is true that you can still be, and maybe it's just in my adult years being able to identify it. And the more deeper I get in my own faith is like, you can go to church. You can do your cute little supper prayer. There's nothing wrong with it. You could do all the things, the legalistic, logistical, like, but faith is relational. It's a relationship with Jesus. It's a relationship with God. It's prayer. Like you said, while you're getting the groceries, you just relate things, and it should be relational. And if it's not, I challenge you to reach out for it, because he's dying for it also. I mean, the church was all, and churches are valid. That is not what I'm saying at all. Churches are valid, and groups and all the things that go around it. But his idea, I think all along, was for relationship. It's to be in relationship with you. And so I encourage you guys, as you listen to this, to form a deeper level of relationship with God.
Yeah, what springs to mind is the scripture verse where it's our bodies are temples. And how that was packaged to me growing up as a young woman was always in a sort of like purity sexual way, like your body's a temple. And like, absolutely, like, with thinking about my past with drinking and poor eating and, everything like that, it's like, absolutely, your body's a temple in a lot of different regards. But if our body's a temple, then that does mean that we can be in church wherever we go, and we're able to have that ability to be in a place, in a state of worship wherever we are.
Oh, that's a beautiful way of putting it. Absolutely. Okay, so tell me, why was it necessary to write the book? Because I'm looking at it from your point of view and going, you went through it, you beat the addiction, so to say, which I also understand is not really. You live it every day. So you choose to say no, right?
And I didn't beat it. He did. So I'm just a witness to it.
Thank you. Thank you. That is way better. You're right. Like, he beat it for you. You get to Jesus. You stop drinking a beer before breakfast. Like, you're going to live this clean life. And praise God, got married, kiddos. Why was it still necessary for you to write the book to tell others?
Yeah. So believe me, I was on the flight to our honeymoon when the idea for the book came to me. Like I said, as I was going through all of these experiences, as I pursued seminary school and, I was the only white student in my class, like that was all, it just existed in a bubble. Like I just was following God in that time. And I thought, there was almost a part where I think people in my life were like, oh, that was that weird phase she went through with seminary school. But it's like, I've just followed God. Like that really, I hope that is how he feels about my life when he looks at my life, because that is what I'm trying to do. And writing the book was no different. I didn't write this book because I thought it was this big, great story. Although in hindsight now I'm like, oh, that's a rather compelling story. Yes. Somebody who's racist being, finding Jesus, finding faith, and then being called to a Black seminary school. There's a lot of tension in that story. Like, how's it going to turn out? And I'm reminded of the day in class where we talked about the hymn Amazing Grace, which I don't know if you know this, it was written by a slave trader. And that was a super awkward day in my life.
Tell us about it, because some people don't know. I do know some of the background because I've read the book, but tell us about that particular day and why it was so uncomfortable.
Yeah. So, I had been in the class for several weeks, like it was a full semester class. And I can't really remember where this class fell, but I was at the point where I felt like I belonged and, like I was just one student in the class, like I met some friends and, like had great rapport with everybody. And that was great. And then the day came when the professor decides to tell us the origin story of the hymn Amazing Grace, which was written by a slave trader who later found Christianity and turned abolitionist. But his whole conversion happened while he was on a journey, like I forget, to or from Africa with kidnapped Africans in the boat, like it was, he was committing this horrible spiritual crime, one of the worst things known to humanity. And that's where God found him. That's where he prayed for, a storm came over the boat. He began to pray for mercy. The waters calmed and he had this big epiphany that, oh my gosh, yes, there is a God. And if there is a God, then that means we're all his children. And how am I living my life? Like he had the whole moment. And although he didn't leave the slave trade right away, he did, shortly thereafter and became an abolitionist. And so when we look at the lyrics of the song Amazing Grace, I think it gives it so much more meaning of like, a wretch like me, you're not kidding. Like, what if like what? And we think we're too far gone for God. But for me, the day that story was shared in class was really uncomfortable, like it just inherently hearing a story about slavery in any regard is uncomfortable. Hearing it as the only white person in the room, super duper uncomfortable. But what wound up happening was I was like physically so, I don't know. I was just kind of sitting there like, okay, just don't move. Don't, because I knew all the other students were looking at the professor, but there was also a part of me where I was like, I mean, if I were somebody in this room, I would probably be looking over at me to see like, well, how's she handling this conversation? And that was just me kind of in my own head. And when I finally looked up with tears in my eyes, our professor was looking right at me, and he gave me this look of just compassion and conviction. And it was like I felt his soul almost like communicating with mine, saying, come along with us. This story is for everybody in the room. Come along with us. You're with us. And this story is for everybody. And he went on to share the sermon that no one is too far gone for God. Absolutely no one, which is a truth that I cling to in my own life. And with regard to other people, in my life and in this world, no one is too far gone for God. And I talk about what it felt like to be on the receiving end of grace in a sermon about grace, because, he didn't have to give me that look. He didn't have to give me that little smile and the encouraging nod. He welcomed me into the message instead of ostracizing me out of, or making me feel like any more of an outsider than I did. He went out of his way to welcome me into the gospel of Jesus Christ, and being demonstrated that spoke so much more than just being told about it. Here was our professor living the gospel of Jesus Christ, living, grace and mercy and, all these things, and trying to make sure that I came along with him in the story so that I could benefit, not just feel uncomfortable in my seat, but that I might be blessed by the story. And I have been profoundly. And so when God called me to write the book, we were flying on our way to our honeymoon. So we got married in late 2018. We took a little bit of time and went on our honeymoon in early 2019. I was in the plane. My husband was asleep. And this idea for this book just dropped into my spirit as though it was already written. All it needed was just me to type the words, because the entire story was there in the book, and I just felt it. And I looked around the plane, and I looked up, presumably where God was, higher than, in heaven, higher than the planes. And I just kind of prayed, you want me to write a book about what? You want me to write a book about racism? I don't want to write a book about racism, and I don't think anybody wants to read a book about racism written by somebody who looks like me. What am I going to contribute of value to the conversation? But I realized, over time and seeking him, it's not about what I can contribute. It never has been. It's not about me. I say it in the book at the very end. It's like, I was so honest in this book about how far down I fell, so that you could see the height of God's glory when you see where he brought me to today. And when I got that ego where I was like, oh, I don't want to share that. I don't want to share those thoughts I had, the racist thoughts that, in the parking lot where I'm like locking doors, I don't want to share that in the book. It's like, well, it's not a story about you, Trisha. It's a story about God. You're just a character. You happen to be one in the forefront of this story, but you are a character in his story. So tell the story. And to the extent that I try to conceal my own sins and weaknesses and misgivings, it's like I conceal his power, because I hear people talk to me about the book and they're like, oh, geez, it was really bad. In addiction, it was really bad, wasn't it? And it's like, I want you to have that reaction. I want it to be visceral. I want you to know how bad it was, so you know how good he is.
Hey, encouragers, are you tired of feeling overwhelmed by information overload? Do you crave clarity and purposeful progress? Less of a fire hose and more of a slow drip? Let me introduce you to the Clarity Blueprint membership community. It's a place where women just like you gather to transform their lives from chaos to clarity. We take purposeful steps each month so you can see results and not get overwhelmed. Imagine this: twice a month, you'll join a supportive group of like-minded women on a journey to make progress in smaller, more edible bites than another huge commitment of time or energy. Our sessions are designed to help you cut through the noise, set meaningful goals, and take actionable steps toward progress. Think of it like your podcast listening with additional support. You'll get access to our monthly calls, worksheets, videos, guest speakers, resources, and a fun community that's cheering you on every step of the way. Say goodbye to overwhelm and hello to purposeful progress immediately. We promise to keep it simple yet impactful and very affordable. Visit theencouragerpodcast.com, click on the tab Clarity Blueprint, and become a member today. You can join at any point, and we can't wait to see who's going to walk along this journey with us. Oh my gosh, I love I don't know if it's a visual in my head, but that's right. Like if you know the depths, then you know the glory. Like
Exactly.
You know, if he's willing to go into those depths, the sheer amount that the glory that you can have on the other side is just profound, and also explains why while reading the book, I too was like, wow. I mean, I'm a white woman too. So you're reading it and you're like, oh my gosh, I've had some of these same thoughts. And so I was able to like gain so much insight into how to behave now and how to think now that I didn't even realize was there until reading your book.
Yeah. And thank you so much for, being so forthcoming with like your personal experience with the book, because I hear that so often from people. And what's interesting is like, I went out of my way to make sure I'm not assuming anything about anybody. I'm not calling you racist. I'm not calling, anybody like, I don't say if you look this way and you're this gender and you have that, I don't do any of that. I'm saying I have had racism in my heart for a very long time. And here's my experience with it when I've brought it to God. There is no accusation. There's no assumption about anybody else. It's purely, it is his story, but it's purely just my story and my experience with it, with the sin of racism. And I learned that, I once had somebody talk to me about their experience with addiction. And what was interesting was like, at no point did they wag their finger at me and they were like, you're a dirty drunk and a low down, no good, and because I've had that experience in my life. And what did it do? It just kind of made me retreat and be like, no, I'm not. And then I went and drank over it, blame it on a day job. But it's like, I knew that like pointing the finger, Jesus didn't do it. And the most impactful people in my life haven't done it. So like, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to focus on, the story God's asked me to share. I think sometimes in our society, it's so much easier for people to point the finger at other people than to like really, maybe experience that vulnerable relationship with God that we started off talking about, and that's where the magic is, like the worst parts of myself, my biggest weaknesses, my biggest sins have all allowed me to experience God in a deeper way. And in that way, I am tremendously grateful for them. I say to people today, I'm grateful to be a recovering alcoholic. I've been sober now 12 and a half years. And it's like, I'm so grateful for it. It changed my life for the better. I met God and experienced God in such a new way when I was pacing the floors of my, run down, low income, 1-bedroom apartment in those early months where I'd literally count minutes until it was 1 a.m. when the bars would close, 2 a.m. when the gas station would close so I could no longer get there. And then I could exhale like, okay, he got me through another day. But there were days where I would count literally like 5-minute segments. Just me and God, me praying desperately. God, get me through the next 5 minutes. Just get me to 2 p.m. Get me to 2 p.m. And then at 2 p.m., God, get me to 2:15 p.m. Get me to 2:15. Help me reorganize a closet and help me get to 2:15. Just give me something to do. And, I think why I'm able to see God in such little things through my days now is because I needed him so constantly in the beginning of my relationship with him.
Yeah, because of the depth you had to go with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't do it. And at that point, addiction had such a stronghold on me. But now I get to look people in the eyes and tell them with absolute certainty and zero doubt that there is nothing impossible for God. Like we read the gospel and we talk about, the resurrection of Lazarus, how Jesus raised him from the dead when he was physically dead. And it's like, I have a lot of friends in recovery for addiction, and I have friends who doctors have raised from the physical dead. And that's fine because we're in the Bible, it says something about how we're here to do same and greater works. So like, okay, humans made in God, in the image of God, we can do things that, has been done in the Bible, but seeing what has raised people from the physical dead, like people in the medical field, that's amazing. And I'm so grateful for them. But like, there was not a person on this planet who could raise me from the spiritual grave I was in. I was living in hell. People like to think you have to die to go to hell. Well, I got news for you. The devil is not merciful enough to wait. He will take what he can from you and he will drag you there and keep you there until you reach up. And on that day, I reached up, and I know that like miracles are among us every day, and running this account, it's just been astonishing. I mean, how many women write to me that they were diagnosed infertile, impossible to have kids. They've got multiple kids. How many people in recovery, thought it was impossible and they're, sober and clean. How many people thought that their marriages were too far gone and yet God restored it. It's like, when God called me to start this Instagram, I was just like, what am I going to say? I'm a stay-at-home mom.
So let's talk about this, because this is where I'm like, one of the questions I had pre-planned, you guys, was like, why do you think your Instagram is exploding? Because when I first, found out about you, I was like, oh, sweet. I love listening to these. And then all of a sudden I was like, holy cow, this is really taking off. Holy cow, holy cow. And then you were saying, guys, what's going on? I have some thoughts as well, but I'd like to hear from your point of view, like what started happening when you were vulnerable enough to start sharing some things on the Instagram page?
Yeah. It's weird because, when I first felt called to start it, I didn't know what am I going to say? Who's going to take anything I say seriously? I'm a stay-at-home mom. I got 2 kids. What am I going to say? But I felt God calling me to do it. And so if you go back to my early videos, like 2 years ago, it was me in the bathroom doing my makeup while my kids were like running around in the background, because it was like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I know I need to build it on top of an existing habit. And every morning with 2 little kids at that time, an infant and a toddler, I needed under eye concealer. So I was like, every morning when I do the under eye concealer and I do, the messy bun, like that's going to be my time to do a video. And I just built the habit, and with consistency, I think like God, if you show up consistently and kind of do your part, that then once God sees that you're willing to do it, even when it's not yielding any returns. I mean, I like those first few videos, they had like, 12 views, and like, 2 of them were me and my husband, and the others were like, friends of mine. And then there was one stranger, and I'm like, how did they end up here?
Right.
But little by slowly, people started following the account, and I would thank him every time, and then, a couple viral videos, and just over time, it's over 128,000 people now, which is, I literally can't, I'm from a town of like 7,000 people. So I can't even wrap my head around any of that. I just kind of talk to the camera. And I try to get to know people on the account as much as I can. And I think that maybe that's something, is like, I'm not in some big fancy studio. I don't have my hair and makeup done perfectly, or ever, or, like at all in some cases. Sometimes I'm crying. Sometimes I'm so grateful. In all cases, I'm talking about God. And I don't know. I hope that it's him increasing the accounts.
Oh, it is, because I've tried to figure out Instagram and I can't figure it out, guys. Definitely God.
Neither can I, honestly, because I joke with my husband. Over the last 2 years, there will be times where I'm like, oh, this video is a good one. This is going to be a great one. And it turns out like nobody really interacts with it. And then the ones I never expect people to relate to are the ones that everyone loves. And I'm like, I have no idea what people want. I've stopped trying to figure out a long time ago. I'm just going to try to create the videos he's asked me to. And I think that when I see some of those surges come in is when I follow the spirit of like, okay, is this the video you want me to write or not write, but record? I think you don't have to be, I don't even want to use the word perfect, because perfect is so laughable. Like, you can be a recovering atheist, alcoholic, person who lived in hate and just despair and still be used. Like, that's what I want people to see. You know, the other day in one of my videos, I gave people a tour of my really messy car. And I was like, I'm messy and he's using me. You're messy. He wants to use you. Like,
Absolutely.
without all the filters, I don't have anybody else behind my account. You know, I don't have any team or anything. I don't know. I don't know if other people do. I guess they probably do, but I'm not, you know, I just record videos between car line pickups and, you know, grocery store visits. And here we find ourselves.
I think it's because of your genuineness and authenticity behind it. It's like, take it for what it is, but that you could tell it's backed by prayer before, prayer after. Like, I want to deliver. I've seen you come on and make apologies for like, hey, I want to clarify this. And if this was taken any other way, which I also think is an act of like, I'm a sinner and I will always be one, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to try and get better every time that I do this. And that is where I'm like, this is exploded. I'm so surprised you said 128,000 because I remember when it jumped from like 7 to 28,000 and that was a tearful video. And I was like, yeah, dang, what is going on? So I had no idea it just jumped up to that, but that is God led. And I love when you were talking earlier too about raising people from the dead and Jesus throwing up to Lazarus. Did you know he was late? He was late and
Yes.
totally calm about it.
Yeah.
I'm like, that says something. I mean,
Yes.
like for me personally, who is getting later in my years of not showing up, I'm like, not that I am Jesus by any means, but I'm like, I got to figure out why he was late. Is that just like God's message is he's never late. God is never late for the message, for the saving.
You know, what's interesting is I actually delivered a sermon about this topic in seminary school. We, as students, we were called up and had to deliver several sermons through the course of the class. And on this occasion, I talked about, it was actually the story of Abraham with the sacrifice, but it's the same premise of like God showing up at like the very last possible moment. And it's like, I believe that happens so that whenever a human being sees the story, they'll know it had to be God because there is no other explanation. You know, in my life with addiction, I know people who had known me growing up had all but, you know, washed their hands. Oh, well, she's hopeless. She's too far gone, you know, so that when God did show up, it was late enough. He was late enough that it would end in my own life. You know, I was still trying things. I was like, oh, you know, if I dyed my hair this color, oh, if I moved over here, oh, if I tried different, you know, a different morning routine. It's like he wanted me to exhaust everything so that when he showed up late in my eyes, it was right on time because at that point, there could have been no other question about where the salvation came from, where the healing and resurrection came from, because we had tried everything else. We had given up hope on everything else. And now it's the right time. Now you've laid it all down. But when I'm still thinking that I can play a part other than simply my willingness to reach out to him, that's too early. You know, I was just having this conversation with a girlfriend of mine the other day. I was going on about mom overwhelm, which I experience from time to time, where there's just so much stuff. And she brought it back and she goes, Trisha, what can you control? And I paused and I thought about it. And I was like, well, there's really only one thing I can control, and that is whether or not I seek God. Because if I don't seek God, I don't have any control over anything and it's going to be a mess. And if I do seek God and surrender to his will, well, then everything happens according to his will. So it's, you know, there's nothing for me to control because he's controlling it all. My only act of participation in any day is whether or not I reach up and surrender and say, I'm here to do your will. You know, like that's the only thing I can control is a daily commitment to turn it over and serve him.
Mm-hmm. To walk alongside him 100%. Doesn't make it any less chaotic, but it does help you to breathe a sigh of relief because it's like,
yes.
Okay, but this is what he's called me to. And I you know, speaking of the Instagram and stuff, I'm not ready to like do a whole sermon or anything like that, but I am getting annoyed with the idea that we're like romanticizing the chaos and like somehow we're not qualified or like, it's fine. And I'm like, no, you were called to be a mom. And we're not saying a perfect mom by any means, but that's a gift. This role is a gift. And you were called to lead this business or this side business or to be this man's wife. Like these are these are roles that are gifts. And I don't want you to feel unqualified. You are qualified in whatever unique way that is. Stop telling us that it's chaos and it's fine. It's just this way. And I'm like, no. You got this.
And, I think over the years, I've heard this phrase called toxic positivity. And it makes me sad because I'm like, that's a paradox and that doesn't exist. Yes, I when I'm having a hard day, like sometimes it helps me to think about how things could be worse. It gives me that greater perspective. And then there are other days where having somebody just listen to me, can help, and feeling that encouragement of a friend that you do have this, you can do this, and when you can't, he can. So can we seek him in it? I'm going to talk about something that I struggle with most as a mom, and just a human, and that's laundry. When I was a single young woman, I struggled with laundry and I didn't even know what was coming as a mom with just the constancy of laundry. And I struggled for such a long time. And I even joked, about a year ago, I broke my nose while doing laundry. And I came on Instagram and I go, I have always suspected that laundry was of the devil. And now I know for sure because it broke my nose. What wound up happening was we got one of those fancy washing machines with the slow close, quiet lid. And when I was going up to transfer the laundry, I just hit it square on my nose because the lid was going down. And it was so stealthy, I didn't even hear it. So anyway, broke the nose doing laundry. Not a fan of laundry. That being said, I have recently, I follow some other Christian accounts. And in passing, one of these Christian accounts was talking about how she does her kids' laundry every day. And I was like, well, that's a really weird thing to do. Why would you want to prolong it every day? Why would you want to experience it every day? And then I got to thinking about it and I was like, I don't need to let the hampers get up to the top. I could do them at half. I could do them every day. And I am now in the habit of doing laundry every day. And it's so much more manageable because it's just a little bit. It's not folding an entire hamper of clothes that's going to take me 45 minutes to fold and 35 minutes to put away. It's literally like 10 minutes to fold, 5 minutes to put away. If I do it every day and stay on top of it. But like, that I feel like that's a sermon in itself because that to me feels like faith sometimes where it's like, do we go to God daily to maintain our faith in an active way that feels manageable? Or do we go to him in crisis moments and then it's an emergency on top of whatever emergency is already happening? I was really thankful early on. A friend of mine told me, it's really easy to fall off the spiritual beam, but it's just as easy to get right back on. And so like, if somebody listening today doesn't have a daily practice with God where you hit your knees and just talk to him, even for a couple minutes, believe me, some mornings I'm on the bathroom floor, my kids are running around, around me. They're, throwing stuffed animals at each other, laughing. And, I'm trying to focus, but it's like, I do it and it matters because he sees it. And it's just that act of obedience. It's like the Instagram when I said I just kept showing up and doing it every day. And little by slowly, it became something big. I mean, that's really what my faith has been. I just show up every day and just keep doing it with the kids, climbing on my back and the stuff in the oven.
It's when we overcomplicate it. It's that relational thing. Like when we overcomplicate it, then it just gets weighty and confusing. But if we continue to just hand it over, surrender, obedience, whatever those words look like for each one of the listeners personally, that's the first steps to it. 1,000%. Yeah. Okay. What is the name of the book and where can we get it, Trisha?
It is called Pray for Them, The True Story of a Racist White Christian Called to Black Seminary. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, a lot of other bookstores. You can get ebooks on like Apple, Google Play Store, Kindle, all those things. And thank you to everybody who has read it and reviewed it and shared it with people. And thank you, for the opportunity to come on and talk about it today. I love this book. I love to hear how it blesses people's lives. And, as funny as it is when people say, I feel like I know you, I'm like, you do, because you basically just got a snapshot of my brain. So like, good luck.
So true. And so that's what I would say is thank you for being vulnerable to write it and to give us an insight of what it was like to go through your childhood and even your early 20s was really interesting to read as well and very relatable into now. And so it's so fun to see the story. So I highly recommend reading the book and then also following Trisha on Instagram because it's the best little mini sermons you can receive and implement immediately. One of my goals for this new year with the podcast is that there would be actions they can take immediately after listening. Otherwise, it feels like a content fire hose and nobody needs that. But the actions you can take immediately is to buy the book and then start implementing just the thought processes that she brings about in the book. Like, have you ever thought about it like this? That's enough. That's all you need. And then also make sure you follow Trisha on Instagram so you can get the little mini boosts a day that just help you to reflect on what matters. So we always ask our guests at the end, how would you encourage our listeners?
Oh, I love this. This is such a great podcast title and such a great concept. I would just encourage your listeners to go to Nineveh. The whole sermon with my broken nose on the washing machine was that I heard it crack. And then like I got talked out of it by a friend who was like, you're probably just having anxiety. And I was like, no, I heard it crack. I know it's broken. I went to the doctor. They confirmed, yes, it's broken. I know what I heard. You know what you heard from God. You know the call that he has on your life, whether it's to start the business, whether it's to move forward in a relationship, whether it's to move your family to a different state. You know what you heard from God. And I just want to encourage you to go and follow him. Go to your Nineveh. It's sooner rather than later is better. That's the name of the game because you're going to have to go eventually. And all that's going to be done in the meantime is just wasting more time. So I would encourage you to, go to the Nineveh that you heard.
I love it. Go to the Nineveh. That is very practical and very, very easy, not easy to do, but easy to comprehend. Like, I know what she's talking about. And
easier than the other way, which is living a life of storming on the ship and getting eaten by whales and all the chaos we live in by not going to Nineveh. So it is hard to go to Nineveh, but if we really think about it, it's way harder not to.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, thank you so much, Trisha. Until next time, encouragers, we got this because he's got us. Thanks so much for tuning in. If the Encourager podcast has helped or encouraged you in any way, please subscribe to the show and leave a 5-star review. And then help us spread the message of encouragement and hope by sharing the podcast with others. Until next time, encouragers, we got this.
Have you ever considered yourself a messenger? Whether it's mics like this, bookshelves around the world, stages to take, or art to make, or perhaps businesses to build, it's time we start testifying truth unashamedly, creatively, and in love. My name is Tamara Andrus, the host of the Messenger Movement podcast, which is designed to catalyze Christians to speak, write, build, and testify. If you're ready to turn your message into a movement and want to run with other messengers doing the thing at scale globally, search and follow the Messenger Movement podcast on your favorite podcast platform today or lifeaudio.com.